been terrible on Gaza. Hates you. You do not belong here anymore, Scott.
A group was seen yelling and following Weiner through Dolores Park. They were heard criticizing Weiner's views on the conflict in Palestine. At a congressional debate earlier this year, Weiner refused to call the war in Gaza a, quote, genocide. He reversed that position a week later. Weiner says he was forced to leave due to harassment, threats, and physical intimidation. Weiner responding, saying, quote, as I walked through Dolores Park to participate in the trans-led Pride Shabbat service in connection with the Trans March, a group of people began screaming at me, ran up to me, surrounded me, and began harassing me, both verbally and physically, including physical contact. He continued, they made statements about my Israeli handlers, among many other inaccurate, extreme, and vile statements. They were so physically and verbally aggressive that it was impossible for me to safely remain in the park.
That clip and others of California congressional candidate Scott Weiner has gone viral in recent days. What does the harassment of Scott Weiner have to do with Einat Wilf and her newly founded Oz Party? Everything. Like many of you listening, I had no idea who Scott Weiner was until about a week ago. Suddenly, he was everywhere. A mid-50s California state senator since 2016, openly gay, known to be an unflinching pro-trans activist. Weiner was anchored firmly within the progressive camp, whatever that means these days. So I've been reading up a bit on Scott Weiner, and here are some pertinent facts that I think are helpful to know. Mr. Weiner is now running in Nancy Pelosi's seat for Congress. At a public debate he attended in early January, after he was a declared candidate, Weiner was asked whether he agreed that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza. He did not respond. 4 days later, after having been the target of very strong backlash, Weiner issued the following statement on X.
For those of you who saw the debate clip from last week, I want to clarify that I do believe Israel has committed genocide in Gaza, and I want to explain why I hesitated at the debate. For the past 2 years, I have harshly opposed Israel's escalations in Gaza, and I've used phrases like total destruction and catastrophic levels of death and moral stain. But I haven't used the word genocide, and I want to explain why. As a Jew, I am deeply aware that the word genocide was created in the wake of the Holocaust, which was the industrial extermination of 6 million Jews. For many Jews, associating the word genocide with the Jewish state of Israel is deeply painful and frankly traumatic. But despite that pain and that trauma, we all have eyes, and we see the absolute devastation and catastrophic death toll in Gaza inflicted by the Israeli government. And we all have ears, and we hear the genocidal statements by certain senior members of the Israeli government. And to me, the Israeli government has tried to destroy Gaza and to push Palestinians out, and that qualifies as genocide.
I assume that Scott Weiner figured that that would put the matter to bed, but it didn't. Because in the progressive camp of the US and elsewhere these days, bringing Scott Weiner to his knees was not enough. That's not even what it was about. And he should have known that. He's a smart guy. Duke undergrad, Harvard Law. Scott Weiner should have understood that he was being pilloried, not for his position on Israel, but for his support for the existence of Israel in any way. And this core truth that has prevailed throughout the ages is also a pillar upon which Einat Wilf builds her case for Zionism. Jews, no matter how supplicant, no matter how self-loathing, Jews will never be accepted as anything but the other. We're going to show a brief clip now from a 5-minute animation done and released just a few days ago by Einat Wilf. I encourage you to watch the full video. You can find the link in the show notes to this episode. As she quips in the note she sent around with the animated history of the Jews in Israel, It reduces 25 years of her professional work, not to mention a few thousand years of history, to 5 minutes. It's quite an accomplishment, and well done. Here's a brief peek at one bit of the 5 minutes, and this is so relevant to the story of Scott Wiener.
Exiled and scattered, we were never seen as equals or fully belonging. Even when we reduced our Jewish identity to religious practice as opposed to a true people, it wasn't enough. Theodor Herzl saw it clearly. No matter how successful or how well we fit in, Jews would always be the other. So he flipped the question. What if we stopped asking for permission to belong and just went back home? He reminded us all, we are a people, one people, with a shared past and future and a home we longed for. So when the world was being reshaped in the 19th century with empires crumbling and nation states rising, we wanted what others wanted. Freedom and self-determination in our nation state. That's Zionism.
Back to Scott Wiener again, because his case is really important. Rarely is this type of harassment so carefully chronicled as has been the case with him. And that, of course, is because he's a public figure. It wasn't enough that Scott Wiener condemned Israel for being a genocidal state. No, he didn't do it quickly enough. He hesitated. Here is Scott Wiener again, and this is also from recent days. He is being harassed while trying to dine in a San Francisco restaurant. This 3-minute clip is excruciating to watch and to listen to. It is also important, in my opinion, that every single North American should see every second of it. This is happening all over the West. In Toronto, where I come from, this kind of attack on Jewish people, ordinary people, going about their lives is, well, ordinary these days, normalized. Scott Wiener is a public figure, which is the only reason we have this recording of what Jewish life has become since October 7th in much of the United States and Canada. If you wish to skip this clip, then jump ahead 3 minutes. Here it is.
Hey, bro. Hey, Wiener, you gotta get the fuck out my hood, bro. It's free Palestine here. You already know what it is. We against the genocide. You think you're gonna come to my neighborhood, bro? You fucked up. You fucked up. It's gonna be a problem. There's innocent children being killed in Palestine. You don't come here like it's good, but you're pushing that genocidal agenda as a Zionist, bro. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about him. This is the motherfucker that is the reason why a lot of people can't live in San Francisco no more. When there were people voting to live in San Francisco for low-income housing, you voted against it. I know my shit. I know my shit. I studied it, motherfucker. Free Palestine. Say free Palestine right now on camera, dog. Say it. 2026. I don't need to talk about none of that shit. I'm talking to him. This is the mission district. You should be ashamed. You have no shame come to my community. This is the mission district, homie. Free Palestine, bro. Hey, are you trying to defend him? I don't want to talk to you. I'm talking to him. Why are you not saying nothing? Why are you not saying nothing, bro? Why are you not saying nothing? Say free Palestine for the camera, dog. You say you're against the genocide, right? That's what you said? Because you're running for office? Say free Palestine then. Say free Palestine. You can put your face on camera, but you can't speak on his behalf. You're a politician, right? You're a senator. You're a position of power. This is what you thought, bro. You come to the mission district, you will get called for the bullshit you do to our people. Maybe everyone here doesn't know what you've done, but I know. Mario Woods, Alex Quieto, Luis Gongora, when they were killed by SAPD, you didn't stand for them. You were silent. Silent as our people got gunned down in these streets. And you come to my community and you think it's okay? It's not okay, bro. It's not okay. Say free Palestine. I'm giving you the opportunity to say that shit right now. I don't want to hear nothing but the words free Palestine. You can't say it. You still get AIPAC money because I heard you say you didn't, but then someone put it on you and say you did.
That's not true.
Just say free Palestine. Are you against the murders of innocent children, innocent people getting killed in Palestine? If you are, then you will say free Palestine. If you're not, then you'll stay silent like you are. There's some other words.
You want to talk?
I want him to leave.
No, we're ready
I
to
want
talk.
him to leave.
Look, can we have a conversation like face
I
to
want him
face?
to leave.
No, I think we all should have a
Hey,
conversation.
this my hood, bro. This ain't no your hood. You're not from here.
Yes,
Where were you born and raised?
we are all from here.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him. You said free Palestine. See, y'all can't say free Palestine. I went to get kicked out of here, bro. Leave, dog. Hey, Wiener, leave, bro. You know what it is. You know what it is. Nah, bro, nah. If I leave, you gotta leave with me, dog. Hey, bro, you think if you don't leave, we're not gonna wait for you outside? Say free Palestine. Mario Woods, Alex Nieto, Luis Gongora, all their names. Hey, y'all gonna have to kill me, bro. Nah, free Palestine, motherfucker. Piece of shit.
I want to say congratulations, though.
Free Palestine, motherfucker. You piece of shit. Hey, if they kick you out, I'm gonna be on that back door in your helmet, bro. Leave, motherfucker. Leave. Leave. Hey, you owe me. You gotta leave, bro. Round 5, motherfucker. Leave, motherfucker.
Look at Scott Wiener. He is working so hard to remain quiet, not to be provoked. But his eyes, they do not lie. Those are the eyes you see in the rare photographs of the Jews of Europe in the 30s and 40s. Those are the eyes of a successful Jewish American man, thinking he was on the verge of reaching yet another career pinnacle. Those are the eyes of that man beginning to understand. Holy cow, it's happening to me. Einat Wilf is among the most important thought leaders today on what I consider to be among one of the most important issues. What is political Zionism, and how and why is it so distorted and misunderstood? I met Einat very early on in my tenure as Canada's ambassador to Israel, shortly after arriving in January 2014. Several people with whom I consulted as to where to begin to understand this complex environment suggested that I speak with Einat Wilf. She was pretty fresh off her 3-year stint as a member of Knesset, representing the Labour and Independence parties. Einat is a standout in every way. She's brilliant, charming, affable. She commands any room in which she finds herself effortlessly distilling complex issues to a clear essence. That is what she does consistently with the unrelenting tsunami of crises that keep coming at Israel. She helps us all make them make sense. Einat reminds us of the fundamental legal, political, moral, historical reasons explaining and, yes, justifying the creation and existence of the modern state of Israel. Several months ago, Einat announced the founding of a new political party under her leadership, the Oz Party. That is what we discuss in this podcast. Why she is stepping back into the political arena, and why now. And seriously, Einat, this is what you think we need in Israel? Yet another political party? Her answer? Yeah, that's exactly what we need. And I'll explain why. I spoke with Einat in mid-May. Everything she said then is only more relevant today. And the bottom line question that I put to her, why should I vote for you, Einat? We get to that and so much more. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Let's do this. On the day that we recorded this podcast, we encountered technical glitches, let's say, requiring us to switch recording platforms partway through. If you notice that the sound and audio aren't synced fabulously, among other nitpicky things, that's why. Now, here's the podcast. Monday, May 11th, about 4:30 in the afternoon in Israel. Wonderful to see you, Einat Wilf, and thank you for joining State of Tel Aviv and Beyond today.
Very good to see you. Good to be here.
So you are a former member of Knesset, of course. We'll get into all of this. But you recently started a new political party, and it's called Oz. So tell us about Oz. Why did you start a new political party, and why did you call it Oz?
So, a bit in order to explain Oz and my decision, which is not obvious to start a new political party, is my sense is that there are essentially two elections taking place in Israel right now. They will be at the end on the same day and to the same parliament, to the same Knesset, but they're different. One election, which is the big one, about 80% of the Israeli public is emotionally invested in that election. And I call it the who election. It's essentially the yes Bibi, no Bibi election, the blocks election. And about 80% of the Israeli public is participating in that election. And the other election, the 20%, is the what election. About 20% of the Israeli public is interested in that election. They are people who are characterized, you see them in the polls, as sick of the division into blocks. They're sick of elections being organized again and again around one person, especially after October 7th, the war. They really want to discuss the what of Israel, the future of Israel. And I've been in spaces that the who people will yell at the what people, don't you get it? The who is the what. And they're just not interested in that. And I established Oz Party for them. Oz essentially is established with the goal to be the most significant, substantial party for this smaller election, for the what people. And that was basically the idea of Oz. The name itself, of course, inspired by the kibbutzim, Nir Oz, Nachal Oz, comes from the biblical phrase about God giving strength to his people and blessing his people with peace. So I love the notion. It's a short word. It really kind of conveys that sense of resilience, determination, spirit, strength, and also has both the kibbutzim and the biblical, the strength and the peace, and all of it in a one-syllable word. So I liked it.
Burst your bubble, but I mean, I have to confess, as a North American, when I hear Oz, I think of the Wizard of Oz.
I know.
But I appreciate it. North Americans are not the target audience for your message. I also appreciate what you've just shared with us about why you chose it and how you chose it. When we spoke previously, Einat, you had mentioned, I'm pretty sure I got this straight, that the what portion of the electorate is comprised of about 20%.
Yes.
And the who's are 80.
Yes. Yes.
Where do you derive that breakdown from, the 80-20?
So it basically consistently appears in a lot of polling. It's just that in Israel, there's a tendency not to put a lot of emphasis on the undecideds. But all the pollsters will testify to that. At the minimum, it's 10%. At the maximum, it's 30%. But most pollsters agree that it's around 20%. Those are people that, despite there being quite a few parties, are still undecided. And they're not just passively undecided in the kind of I haven't thought about it way. They're undecided in the sense of almost a rebellion of saying, we don't want to have the same discourse, the same discussion. We're not happy with this elections between blocks, about these camps, this partition. We're definitely not happy with the fact that our media and politics, and I would add our brain cells, are organized around a single person. And they consistently appear in all the polls. It's just that in Israeli convention, they tend to not publish the number of undecideds, but occasionally they'll say something about it.
Interesting. So I'm just sort of envisioning a Venn diagram and, of course, trying to place myself into your who, what category. There must be some overlap, obviously, because we all live in this reality. And so as I'm thinking about where I'm going to put my vote in the election, I feel that, well, on the one hand, I'm kind of stuck in this block system. It's a lot bigger than I am. But everything you're saying really resonates strongly. How are you going to address that like just before we get into your policies, even kind of reaching people to move them to understand that there might be a third way?
There's something that I'm doing, but there's some things that I'm just, let's say, assuming. One of the most interesting analyses I once read about how change leadership works resonated with me because they said that change leaders do not change by coming with like ideas and charisma, but they actually, that the people that we think of as change leaders are the people who are the ones who noticed that the change already happened. So, in some ways, what I believe that I'm seeing is that 20%, which again, in a parliamentary proportional based system is a lot and could actually be determinative, that people already moved. And I see that it's young people. We resonate a lot with young people. I get invited to a lot of forums of young people. They just fought, they sacrificed, they saw friends being killed, injured. They've had it. They've grown into this desert of political discourse, and they want to know the what of their sacrifice. Another group is again just people who are tired, exhausted. I was in this, in Hebrew, we call it chug bayit, these home parlor meetings. They kind of form the backbone of how you do retail politics in Israel. In Israel, it's much less about eating corn dogs in local fairs and kissing babies. Retail politics in Israel is much more about these home parlor meetings. And I was in one 2 days ago, and the woman who introduced me, whose home it was amazing. She talked about how tired she was of the who discourse, and that she was so thrilled to hear me. And I do a lot of podcasts in general. A lot of the way that I conduct politics is not through the mainstream channels, is not kind of billboards and TV. It's podcasts and home parlor meetings. And you could, like, her voice really indicated that exhaustion of like, we're done. And I'm thrilled to find someone who is not talking about who. She's respectful of the fact that people want to talk about the what. So I find actually that those people are mostly coming to me. Every evening I'm at a home parlor meeting. None of them have been initiated by me. All of them have been people calling up, writing to the Oath Party website and saying, we want to host a home parlor meeting.
You have plenty of charisma and all of the other, sizzle that sort of said, well, that's not really what people are interested in, but it certainly helps to get your message out. And I've watched you in action now for well over a decade. So you're someone, in my view, who comes to the table with the package and the substance, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I just want to sit for a moment with the whole fatigue thing that you brought up, because it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everyone feels it. Everyone experiences it in their way. As you're aware, I moved almost 2 years ago from the center of central Tel Aviv to a kibbutz in the south, not far from the Gaza envelope, which was the main area that was attacked on October 7th, but far enough. And on my kibbutz, we have taken in a large number of the displaced residents, members of Kibbutz Kfar Aza, which was hit terribly hard. And I lived this really quite intensely in a different way than I think we feel it in Tel Aviv. And the fatigue takes so many forms. And I feel that so many people are just saturated. On the other hand, as you point out, people's kind of senses are very sharpened. I feel that we are on a knife edge, that this election is probably the most important ever in the history of the state of Israel. And so much turns on it. And that leads us right into who you are, Oz. Why should I vote for you? What are your policies? What differentiates you, Einat, and your party from all the others out there?
So, first, on a broad level, I would say that what's unique about what Oz as a political party brings to the table is a complete and coherent vision for Israel that addresses the key and kind of most in depth problems. Because I think what characterized me before October 7th and definitely after is this notion of zeroing in on Israel's most foundational challenges and not settling for the idea that we can have half-baked policies, that we can buy, as we say in Hebrew, liknot sheket, buy calm, buy quiet, essentially pay protection both domestically and to our enemies. So what I bring is this notion that says, okay, we are at a moment, which you said, again, people feel it, where we cannot run away from our foundational problems. It's almost a refoundational moment. And a lot of the things that we kind of just used patches and plasters to kind of move along, it doesn't work. Like it fell apart, and now we have to go to the foundations. So that's kind of as an overarching theme. As a kind of organizing principle, one of the principles of Oz is called from exilic mindset to sovereign conduct. The analysis being that a lot of what ails Israel is that we've regressed in recent years, even maybe a few decades, into an exilic mindset. What does it mean? That even though we're the people of Israel in the land of Israel, we are home, we are here for the long term, even though we have readopted, we've regressed into exilic kind of ways of behavior, most especially when you're in exile, you are a people who are at the mercy of others, you do not control your fate, you are weak, and you are temporary. As a result, your whole notion of time is either now or Messiah. But the idea that you build things with a vision over time, pursuing it doggedly, something that ironically characterized the builders of Israel, because I think in rebelling against exile, they were able to have this sovereign mindset. And I think we went a bit through this regression to the mean. So, what does it mean to really have this sovereign mindset? First of all, with our enemies. What Oz argues is that the entire foreign and defense policy of Israel should be organized around one vision: pursue peace based on Arab embrace of Zionism and dismantling Palestinianism. Now, what did I just say? On the one hand, I argue that every Israeli leader always has to be very clear that Israel is a country that pursues peace and whether we have a vision of peace. But we also have to be very clear on what the only obstacle for peace ever truly was, and it is the Arab obsession with the non-existence of the Jewish state, and especially the Palestinian Arab obsession, which I've come to call Palestinianism, and to really focus on the fact that has always been the issue and nothing else. And I use a bit of the metaphor of Shawshank Redemption. I hope I'm not ruining it for anyone. By now, everyone should have seen the movie. The idea that every day you wake up and with a little spoon, you carve your way to your vision of freedom. And this notion is that when people say, what do you mean dismantling Palestinianism? What do you mean that the Arabs will embrace Zionism? You're crazy. It's never going to happen. It's insane. And what I tell people is, first of all, never is a very long time, but it actually doesn't matter if you think it can happen, if you don't think it can happen, if you think it will take a really long time, because this is actually what a sovereign people who are at home and who understand that we are damned or destined, I like to focus on destined, to remain a Jewish minority in an Arab and Islamic Middle East, which means that the only vision of peace is really one where the dominant Arab and Islamic world finally understands that decades of pursuing anti-Zionism were stupid, a waste of time, a waste of resources, I would say dishonorable, and the mark of failed societies. You know, Arabs and Muslims are people who care about honor. There is nothing more dishonorable, in my view, than the pursuit of the destruction of the Jewish state. It's stupid and dishonorable. And this is a vision that I think we need to uphold to our neighbors and our enemies. And I will say that we did our neighbors and enemies and countries that we supposedly have peace with no favors by letting them wallow in the dysfunction of anti-Zionism and never actually upholding standards in terms of what we expect from them. And of course, as you know, a lot of my work has been around the systems that fuel and support and legitimize Palestinianism, like UNRWA and perpetual refugeehood and return. And I focused a lot on the way that Israel, we spoke about it when you were ambassador, the way that Israel essentially covered up for these organizations, again, in this stupid idea that we somehow can buy quiet from our enemies by funding them. So this is basically the first principle. This is what a sovereign nation behaves like, and that's what it expects from itself and from its enemies. Sure.
Before you do the second principle, I want to jump in because it's a really important point. You raised the UNRWA thing, and when I was in office as Canadian ambassador to Israel, and it was a very impactful conversation we had because at the time, Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister of Canada, and he cut off all funding to UNRWA. And I, as ambassador, was receiving pressure from Israel to restore that funding. And I remember I turned to you because you were so expert on the issue. And I was like, just not understanding what was going on. And you're like, Viv, this is what's going on. This is the system. It's now come out into the open. Everyone knows about it. So, it's quite fine for us to discuss it. But I was genuinely shocked. And I think many people would have been at that time. We've also, of course, lived the experience since that's come to be public knowledge that it was the government of Israel that was pressuring Qatar to finance Hamas, as you said earlier, to buy quiet. So these things that you're saying now that may seem so sort of like obvious weren't and a very short time ago. And so much of the reason that they've become obvious and kind of, accepted as almost trite knowledge now is because of the tremendous work you've done over the last decade plus. Before we go on to the second sort of foundational principle of Oz, Palestinianism, I just want to clarify for myself, because you threw out a lot there, and I want to unpack it just a teeny bit. Are you saying that Palestinianism is has become one and the same or enmeshed with anti-Israelism? Okay.
Yes, it's the same thing. Essentially, Palestinianism, I define Palestinianism as the ideology that prioritizes the destruction of the Jewish state over building anything for the Arabs themselves. And it's an ideology that has become influenced and enmeshed with, over the decades, Nazi propaganda in Arabic, Soviet anti-Zionism, pan-Arabism, Iranian Islamism, but where they all coalesce and come together is about the notion of prioritizing the destruction of Jewish sovereignty over building one for the Arabs.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So now let's move on to your second principle, the second Oz principle.
So the second Oz principle is called public services for those who serve the public. And here again, the notion is, let's go to the foundational issue. The foundational issue is not recruiting or drafting a few thousand ultra-Orthodox Haredi men. Because when we think about it in those terms, they're very small, they don't go to the core issue, and nothing moves. The core issue for me is what constitutes Israeli society? What binds us together? What is the element of solidarity? And the analysis says this: Israel is small, it is very crowded, will be even more so with time. And until we have peace with Arab embrace of Zionism, it will need to be a country that fights and defends itself. When you are a country that is physically small, crowded, and fighting, you have a welfare state. You have mechanisms of solidarity. people who toy with libertarianism in Israel, it's ridiculous. Like I tell them, go live in a country that has a massive continent, you can find a little corner. But when you send people to fight and sacrifice for the collective, you have a collective. But then, of course, there has to be real solidarity. So what Oz proposes basically is this. The notion is that the mechanism of solidarity in Israel is and will remain for a very long time through the military. So what we propose is that every Israeli citizen of the appropriate age, and when I say every, it's every, women, men, Jews of all stripes, Arabs, get a draft notice. They all come to the Bakum, the place where you are kind of accepted as a soldier and sorted. They all become soldiers. They all don uniforms. The English word is important. Uniform. They enter under military law and they all serve the same time, and it's all mandatory. But then when the time comes to sort them, the sorting happens at a higher level, still under the military umbrella, but essentially for all the national needs, from military service to agriculture to teaching to whatever is needed. And the idea is that people are sorted and placed individually. Everyone gets an individual profile based on their security risk, their abilities, their kind of who they are, and they are individually sorted. So the idea is to break entirely the notion that we have sectors, that one sector serves and the other sector deigns to volunteer. And none of that. It's all individual based. What this means is that the whole industry of ptorim, of basically you don't need to serve, ends, because there's no people, I mean, it will have to be absolutely extreme cases, who cannot serve Israel in some way, shape, or form. Everyone can serve. And basically, there's always something that can fit on an individual level. So the army doesn't need to change itself. Like if you're an Orthodox man who cannot see a woman a mile in any direction, then go pick avocados. But the military is not going to change for you. And if you're an ultra-Orthodox man who can handle it, then join the military. But it's on an individual basis, not a sector. If you refuse, then essentially I compare you to the wicked son of the Haggadah. You're the one who said, this is yours, not mine. And from that moment on, essentially all the subsidized state services and benefits are gone. If you need any state service, from public transportation to higher education to health, you pay the absolute full price of that. And we actually went in depth to see the value of all the subsidies and benefits that the state provides today, especially in the ultra-Orthodox sector. And most of the benefits are in their 20s, which is great because let's say they decide to not serve when they're 18, but let's say by the age of 21, they realize they can't live in Israel this way, then they can still fix and go serve. So that's basically public services to those who serve the public. And again, it's about going in depth to the question of what constitutes solidarity in the Israeli public and creating a notion of civic engagement rather than sector-based.
So a few questions I just want to ask before you go on. You raised the issue of the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, as we refer to them. There's often a lot of talk about the fact that they are alleged to receive significantly more in terms of public support, money, however you want to phrase it. Do you have data on that? What a Haredi individual family would receive versus someone like me,
Yes.
for example?
So actually the most insane data came from a research by the right-wing Kohelet Institute, but I've actually really gone in depth into it, and I'm now participating in a lot of workshops to learn more in depth the challenge to the state of Israel. But the numbers that they said at the time was that the Haredi family basically, or person, essentially gets more than 10,000 shekels more than he gives, and a secular person gets from the state 5,000 less than he gives. So it was like just some insane gap, which really made it clear, like the amount to which kind of the Israeli, mostly the secular Jews, some of the Christian Arabs are essentially subsidizing a way of life, by the way, that mostly they don't even support. And a bit like UNRWA, what I've realized over the years is that we often think about these groups as like these committed ideologues. But I am much more of the view, in Hebrew we say, en kemach en Torah. If there's no flour, there's no Torah. Once you begin to peer into the billions, the institutions, the mechanism, the education that sustains these ideologies, you understand that these ideologies are not really from God. They're much more embedded into funded institutions and benefits.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to add, because this is a bit of a, pet peeve, is that the degree of state support demanded by the ultra-Orthodox, and to which the current coalition government has exceeded with an A, the amount of money and the lifestyle and the presentation of this as being the purest, highest form of Judaism, in my view, is not you need flour to have Torah. Judaism is all about, it's about balance. It's about balance between, the spiritual world and the profane, the holy and profane. Never before in thousands of years of history have Jews looked to anybody, whether it's a rich person or a state, to support this life where they don't work and they don't contribute civically. So, I mean, it's just been so bastardized. I can't think of a better way to put it. Having said that, before we get on to principle 3, because I'm sure there is one, the Haredi leadership and the Haredi political leadership in particular in Israel controls more or less 15% of the population. That's a very large number. And it appears, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to be a very compliant population. They look on election day to their rabbis to tell them who they're voting for whom they're going to vote, and they do that.
So first, you're absolutely right. This is a complete system that includes education, election systems that are controlled by political parties, massive funding from the kind of benevolent Zionist state. And in fact, what you described is correct. Even though this way of life is presented as traditional, it's actually an invention of the 80s. The Israeli Haredi way of life is a way of life that was born in Israel in the 1980s and has been expanded ever since. But there's nothing traditional about it. There's nothing about God, Torah, mitzvot. It's a way of life that is entirely held together by a perverse system of incentives. And of course, lots of money from the, again, very benevolent Zionist state. The only way to break that is indeed to not enable it. And with, the few Haredis who will talk to this about this to me will say, we will never change it. There's this phrase in Hebrew, it's not the thief who steals, it's the chor. It's like, you create the opportunity, don't blame the thief in a way. This is the responsibility of the state of Israel that enabled it. And it is on us to unenable it, to disenable it. And that's not something that we can expect from them while we continue to incentivize it. And the only way is really to go cold turkey. And also, as part of my going in depth into this issue, for about 20 years, we've been told, give it time, give it time. These are processes that will happen over time. By now, there is a complete understanding. There was no processes, nothing, because you incentivized the opposite direction. So yeah, you had one example here, but when all the incentives went in the other direction, you literally, as with UNRWA, you got what you paid for. So the idea is really to essentially create a coalition government that puts a stop to it.
I have to point out, Almost. I just want to point out this really sharp irony because it was Benjamin Netanyahu acting as Minister of Finance in the early 2000s who said exactly the same things that we're saying now, only in much more strident terms, and broke the back of a system of financial and other entitlements and incentives to pay for the Haredim to maintain their increasingly autonomous society and to live the way they do. And he did the heavy lifting, and it was extraordinary. And he came out, in that year and a half or 2 years when he was sitting in the opposition benches recently, he wrote another book, and it was a memoir / autobiography. And there's a chapter in there, and I'm going to put it in the podcast notes for this episode. I think it's called Fat Man, Thin Man. And he writes about his great accomplishments in breaking this, in saying they were taking too much, the state couldn't sustain it, and I did the heavy lifting. I thought it was going to ruin my political career, but hey, I came through it because I'm a magician. And the same Benjamin Netanyahu has not only reinstated those really obscenely large financial and other incentives, he's increased them. It's uncanny that he would undo his own, I thought, quite extraordinary legacy in that regard.
I'll just add, in the same
Sure.
memoir, in the same book, he also gives the reason. It's a bit what you said at the end. He said that he paid a massive political price for that.
Yeah.
And what he learned actually is not to do it again. So essentially, what he learned is if you do the right thing and pay a political price, then don't do the right thing, which is a very sad thing to learn.
Okay, let's do principle 3, shall we?
Yes. So principle 3, under the headline of from exilic mindset to sovereign conduct, addresses a few key issues, like, for example, education. As you know, I dealt a lot with that, but specifically in terms of the Oz Party platform, what we highlight is, again, a sovereign country doesn't fund and enable sectorial education systems that, as a matter of structure, their graduates are against the country. So the idea is that Israel will only fund and enable one, it could be different schools, but one system of education, which is national, Zionist, and in the Hebrew language for everyone. And once you do that, you can build a second floor. You can add Arabic, you can add the Jewish text, you can add more sciences, but the first floor has to be the same for everyone. That's for education. For borders, for example, one of my arguments that in the territories, I think what we suffer from is what I call a kind of this twilight sovereignty, that it's not clear what is Israel, what is not Israel. When you have these areas where things are not decided, they also tend to breed violence and essentially behavior that you would not tolerate when there's a clear rule of law. So my argument is that Israel's military border, until there is peace, will continue to be the Jordan River. But we can determine a civilian border where we bring under Israeli civilian law part of, at this point relevant, the Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. And my argument is that it has to be done in a Knesset vote, not in any underhanded way. The idea is that Israel will only build in places where it has placed under Israeli law, and that every place that is placed under Israeli law, everyone's an equal citizen. And everywhere else is what I call under active military occupation. Because my criticism of Israel's military presence in the West Bank is that not that we're present there. A military occupation, as you well know, is not illegal. It's actually the legal way by which you govern a territory and a people until you can reach an agreement and peace. But what we do, like a lot of the things, is we do it halfway. We pay all the diplomatic, economic, military prices of military control without actually controlling. We're not behaving like the Americans in Japan or like the allies in Nazi Germany. We're not ensuring that there's no UNRWA and that the education ensures that they're not educated for another generation of fighting the Jewish state. And as a result, we're stuck in a loop. So for me, what is required is this clarity. What is Israel? In Israel, everyone's an equal citizen. everywhere else is active military occupation for the purpose of ending the Arab war against Zionism. And finally, judicial reform, the thing that tore apart so much. Again, the solution here is not an arm wrestling between the executive and the judiciary, which, by the way, the weakening of parliaments towards judiciaries and executives is a global phenomena. Israel's not unique. But the resolution is in strengthening the Knesset as the sovereign body towards the executive and judiciary. We have a lot of elements that are included in that. But again, that's also part of the notion of a sovereign mindset. And I'll end with there's a lot of technical things that you can do to strengthen the Knesset, but ultimately some things you have to embody. And that's, I'll kind of tie it all together back to this is why I established Oz, because ultimately we need to embody the notion that public service politics is ours to do. We cannot outsource it, and somehow things will turn out well.
Okay, I have a few questions because, as always, you are so interesting. It's very rich and always controversial, Einat. So, in no particular order, I'm going to reduce, I think it was principle 3 to, where you're talking about public service and having really a kind of equality throughout society. We all have the same education, basic education in the same language. We serve the country in different ways. But you have sanctions attached to that. So that if for some reason I was to say, I'm not playing, I'm not cooperating, what's your response? What happens to me?
Essentially, you remove yourself from all the public services and all the benefits and subsidies. And to the extent that you want to consume those services, from higher education to public transportation to healthcare, you just pay the absolute full fee for that. And for most people, it will be unbearable.
Yes, it would be prohibitive. So you don't pay, you don't play, right? It's,
Yes.
I mean, what you're saying. You know that there's going to be an immediate reaction to that saying it's coercive, it's undemocratic, it's illiberal. And how would you respond?
So there are different things. Of course, it's coercive. That's the whole idea of a nation and a state that needs to fight. There's nothing more coercive than the draft. But once that's why I started by the fact that Israel is small, crowded, and will need to fight for its existence for a long time. Because in other places, you can have other systems, not in Israel. But once you understand that we need a coercive system of service, then the minimum is to ensure that everyone participates, and certainly that it's not on some sector-based notion of how the service is divided. It is very much democratic in the sense that this is what the society chooses as kind of its ideals. And it's even legal. Some people say, oh, this will not pass Bagatz, the Supreme Court. I consulted with very senior legal scholars. They were like, not only does it pass Bagatz, this is where Bagatz is now. This is what they expect the state of Israel to do. What they told me is they said, this is actually the legal situation. The problem is that it's not the practical situation. The legal situation is that everyone needs to serve, that no one gets to basically dodge the draft, and that there should be sanctions on that. This is the legal condition already. It just needs to be we need to close the gap with the actual practical situation.
We actually need to enforce the law.
Precisely.
Yeah, which is
a novel ideal. Yes.
So the State Commission of Inquiry, that is another issue that occupies a lot of my thoughts and time. The need for a State Commission of Inquiry into October 7th. And of course, I think that any legitimate State Commission of Inquiry would be independent of government and would be looking into a lot of issues, successes, failures, you name it, institutional problems that were deeply embedded in the society that allowed October 7th to happen, and that I think quite sadly continue. Not much has changed institutionally in this country since October 7th. I'm interested in hearing if and what your position is with respect to a State Commission of Inquiry, because October 7th to me is that moment that changed everything. It's like BC AD, right? We will be speaking about Israel for decades, if not longer, in
Yeah.
those terms, before and after October 7th. So how do you view, or don't you, a state commission of inquiry?
So obvious. I mean, of course, the kind of the problem is that it was even made into a question. It would have been like the most obvious thing. It's still, for me, the most obvious thing. I think we need to also just understand what these state commissions can and cannot do. They are important for as a kind of researching what happened, but in that they are part of, like you said, historians will continue to do that for decades. They will not be the first or last word on what actually happened, but they're an important institutional part of it. Just like Yom Kippur War, it wasn't just a commission. We still have books and data coming out, and that's one part. It has an important part in kind of, processing, which is a huge issue. I think we've all been like in war and we haven't processed. I would even say we haven't mourned. And that will be also something that's important for it to do. And of course, also the issue is to find people and institutions who are to blame. And that's also part of it. So we need to, because sometimes people also speak about state commission in different functions. So it has elements, it's relevant for all of those. And of course, not only I'm supportive, I marvel at how this was made even to be a controversial issue.
It is extraordinary. And I think that it's holding us back from moving forward. People need, so it's also a state commission of inquiry. Of course, it's typically or historically has been led by, the members have been appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Israel. It is, it's intended to be a kind of nonpartisan. There are lay people, there are judges, there are lawyers, there are all kinds of people who sit. It has the powers of subpoena, which means it can compel pretty much anyone to come before it, of course, and provide evidence. And then it does its best to come to some kind of conclusion and report. And, you said, well, there is blame, and blame is something that we talk about here a lot. Blame, responsibility, and there are also outliers that did extraordinary jobs to prevent this thing from happening. But I think it's a conversation that Israelis desperately need among themselves to have. So I want to ask you, I mean, we all joke about that's just what Israel needs is another political party, right? And
Yes.
I'm sure you gave this a lot of thought. I'm sure you do. And I have no doubt that you gave this a lot of thought. So I want to ask it in this way. When you were sitting there with your ideas and trying to figure out, okay, which way forward would I like to take? I'm certain that at some point you considered the possibility of going to existing parties and saying, hey, can I join?
Yeah.
But you didn't do that.
True.
Why not?
So what you said about BC and AD is something that I've encountered as well. People don't talk about October 7th as an event. When you ask them about what they're doing, they will say things like, I've encountered it in Israel and with Jews around the world. They'll say things, that was this, I did that. And then October 7th, and it becomes a moment when their life take a different direction. And I went through the same process. First, it was on the issues that I dealt with. As you know, for years, I'm going around with UNRWA, with the rise of anti-Zionism in the West. And I'm like ringing the bells and going to every policymaker. And I'm like, nothing good is going to come out of Gaza. And the billions we're pumping into it, they're telling us what we're going to do, what they're going to do with it. We just got to listen. And but I was made to believe, or at least the feedback I got was like, Einat, nobody cares. Like, enough. And then after October 7th, I mean, I always thought those were the central issues, but suddenly, like, in the most horrific way, more people saw that those were the central issues. And not only did I have a lot to say about them, I realized that what I had to say didn't sit comfortably in any kind of stale political label. It's not clearly right, not clearly left, not even center, because the center is often about not saying things, and I'm saying things. So I realized that I was And, when everybody talked to me, but I realized that nobody came with this kind of coherent vision for Israel that directly addressed our most foundational issues without running away, without kind of glazing over them. And I realized, okay, I will actually just chair a political party because this is the only way to speak clearly about my vision. I can tell you, especially to the larger existing parties, and the price of joining for each one of them was basically to shut up, which is the last thing I want to do, as I'm sure you've noticed. Um, and I want to bring those ideas. I do say to people, though, because there is a concern, we're a new party, the threshold is relatively high. It might come down, but for now it's still relatively high. And people are concerned about, wasting votes. And what I tell people is, I am absolutely committed to giving my all to the what people and to building a political home for them. But if it turns out that there's no interest, then when the time comes in Israel, it's about 45 days before elections. It's when you need to submit the list. That's like the final deadline on when you need to make your choice. I tell people, if there's no support, I'll go home. I'll keep promoting my ideas and fighting for them in other ways. Or I'll join someone else that makes most sense at that moment. But I'm a responsible person, and this is not a vanity project. But until that moment, which is expected to be the first or second week of September, I will do my all to try to build this political home for those what people who are currently politically homeless, and at least give it my best shot.
And your ideas and your voice and the way in which you articulate them, I think, are much needed in this marketplace of political choice. You kind of stole my thunder. I was going to get to the polling, but I want to wrap it into a kind of, final sort of brief chat. The threshold, which you refer, I think it's 3.25%, right?
Yes, 4 seats.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that's about how many votes is
It's actually more. It's going to be between 150 and 200,000 voters.
for each seat?
No,
Or
no,
altogether?
for the 4
Okay.
seats.
Okay. So,
So you're correct.
and so in order for Oz to command the minimum threshold, the 4 seats, in order to meet the threshold to sit in the Knesset, you would have to be polling to get about 150 to 200,000 votes cast for
Yeah.
you, which is a challenge. I mean, it's a crowded marketplace. So I love how you say, well, look, I mean, this isn't a vanity project, and you've been around long enough. I think you have that credibility. People understand that with you. But obviously, you'd like to be in the mix.
Mhm.
So you're going to wait until the moment when you have to decide, I'm going to drop a list, I'm not going to drop a list. Let's say you
But-
drop a list. Let's say that your internal polling is showing you either at the threshold or above. Wonderful. You go, you get your 4 seats. I wish you every success in that.
Thank you.
And then you're playing the game. Even though you're in there for the whats, you're back into playing the game. You've got to get into the block, the coalition, right? So again, you came full circle on me before, I'm coming full circle on you. How have things changed?
So basically, we remain very disciplined as a party, as being the party of what rather than who. Obviously, our preference is for the central Zionist coalition that will be able to make real transformational decision on foundational issues. But on the whole, we're not talking about not who yes and who no. We will join any coalition that will allow us to have substantial impact to promote our what. That's basically, and I think it's the right attitude when you're in a proportional parliamentary system.
Einat, you sat in the Knesset, gosh, how many years ago now?
It was about 15 years ago.
Okay, and a lot's happened since then, and I'm sure that your life has changed and some of your ideas have changed significantly since then, but you have some idea what you're in for, should you succeed. Einat, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and
Certainly.
thoughts, and I've always admired not just your powerful intellect, but you have really great ability to distill complex ideas into simpler, easily digestible, really compelling ways that resonate. I'm curious, just before we close, what's your slogan in Hebrew for your party? Do you have one?
No, we keep raising slogans and shooting them down. So we're open, but no, right now, there's no slogans.
Okay, well, the who's and the what's. I mean, you could do so much great stuff with that in English. I bet you're doing great work, slogan notwithstanding. I look forward to hearing it, seeing it when it's unveiled. Thank you for your time today, Einat. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
And that's a wrap. Thanks as always for being here. The coming election in Israel is, in my view, likely the most important we have had since, well, ever. And that's saying a lot. The stakes are incredibly high. I sincerely hope that the Oz Party is in the mix with at least 4 Knesset seats. In my view, we need smart people like Einat Wilf in leadership positions in Israel. For those of you who continue to enjoy our work, please consider becoming a premium subscriber or make a contribution at Buy Me a Coffee. We are independent and we do rely on you to do what we do. I think I used do 3 or 4 times in that one sentence. Thanks again to those of you who support us financially. It makes a huge difference. Until next time, stay safe. We love hearing from you, so please comment on our website, stateoftelaviv.com, or send us a note to vivian@stateoftelaviv.com. That's VIVIAN @stateoftelaviv.com. And if you go to our website, stateoftelaviv.com, you can find the subscribe button and take it from there. Hope that you do that. On behalf of the State of Tel Aviv core team, Jan Zabo, our creative, graphic, visual, and marketing man, Amir White, producer and editor extraordinaire, sound guy, who is also impressively patient with me and my boomer tech deficiencies, and our social media manager who pitches in on everything. Thank you, Maya Naftalin. Thanks to the team, and thank you, listeners, for being here. Until next time, stay safe.